Right then, here we go. So we've got a couple of things to cover off before I hand over to our first keynote. Welcome to Upload Search. This is slightly different to normal events because I'd normally be looking out at a sea of people and explaining what happens. But we're slightly different. So today I don't have to tell you about the refreshments, the fire escapes, where the toilets are. I'm sure you know you've got that all under control in your own houses or places of wherever you're watching this from. In terms of the running order for today, we have two keynotes, one coming up shortly and another one at 3:30 later on today. Between then and now, we will also have 5 streams where we'll break into different sessions. You'll be able to head over to the sessions on the side where you'll see streams around paid media, SEO, social, content, data and analytics. And each of those sessions will have a moderator in to field the Q&A throughout the day. And again, people from Don't Panic Events will be on hand to help you with anything you need. I want to thank the curators that helped us pull together today's program. As hopefully you're going to see, it's a fantastic lineup. The curators for the event have been Sam Noble, Laura Thomas, Laura Crimmins, Kev Gibbons, and Dan Barker. In terms of making this interactive, as I said, the moderators will be fielding Q&A during the individual sessions, and I'll do the same for the keynotes. But you'll notice there's a couple of different chat rooms. So there's a general chat for the whole event, which you can see right now. And there'll be individual chats at the stage and session level. We also have a networking session on the side. So if you can see a tab over on there that says networking, that kind of randomly matches you with one other person. Great for the extroverts out there. For the rest of you just want to mingle, you'll also find a session called the Upload Tavern, which is just for socializing, catching up in between different events and having a good chat, quite frankly. Finally, there are expo areas where we have promotions from some of our sponsors. So if you get a chance, please do have a look in there. Finally, I think that's everything we've covered off from the logistics. So without further ado, I want to hand over to our first keynote, James Gray, who's a manager. He's product growth at Facebook. And this morning, he's going to be talking about analytics for product growth. Welcome, James.
Hi, thank you, Richard. It's really great to be here. Let me first just get set up and I will share my screen. I think you're about to see something quite meta, so apologies, but hopefully you can see this.
Perfect.
All right. Okay. Hey, everybody. It's fantastic to be here. And yeah, I really appreciate the invite to come and speak to you today. Before we get started, I just wanted to introduce myself. So I'm James. I have been working as an analyst across the tech industry in London it'll be 10 years later this year, working kind of at an array of startups, mostly e-commerce focused. I actually will get into a couple of examples of those later on, but right now, the crucial thing is that I am a product growth manager working at Facebook on community integrity. And that actually is quite a lot of mumbo jumbo to begin with, or like a lot of terminology to begin with. So let me unpack that very slightly. What is community integrity? Well, my team work on projects such as helping us to detect and remove fake or abusive accounts from our platform. We look for compromised or hacked accounts and try to help folks who have lost access to their account gain access and prevent malicious attackers from gaining access to accounts. We look at authenticity verification flows for high reach individuals to make sure that anybody who has a high reach across our platforms, think influencers, we want to try and make sure that they are as secure as possible and that their accounts aren't being hacked, but also that they are the authentic person that they claim to be. We also work on an array of penalty systems, on like reporting flows. It really is quite a broad sweep. But one thing that people often say to me is, well, hang on a minute, you're a manager of product growth. What are you trying to grow when it comes to abusive accounts? And that is a valid question. It does seem like a bit of an oxymoron at times. So I want to give you a very brief history of the team that I work in, because most of this presentation is going to be looking at the work that we do. So actually, product growth started out as the internet marketing team, literally. One of our VPs used to be the SEO person, another used to work on email marketing. And what they found over time was that actually the tactics they were using to grow Facebook's audience via SEO, via email, were the same tactics that would be successful on growing our product. And so they became known as the internet marketing team and then the growth marketing team. And over time, that's evolved. And actually, we've ended up getting involved in more and more areas of the business and using the same tactics to try and grow products. And so we've eventually become the product growth team. And I think you're hopefully going to see some of that legacy as we move through today's presentation. So what is today's presentation? Well, analytics of product growth is the title, and most of it is going to be like best practice examples of things that we've done to our products. So hopefully I'm going to have a lot of the content today is going to be showing you concrete things that Facebook has done to its products and the growth that we've seen from them. Before that, I am going to dig a little bit into how we set up our team, because we really believe that setting up your team for success is actually the most important part to making any of this work. But before I even get into that, I'm going to talk to you about the number one thing that we look for before we work with a team. So my function is relatively small within Facebook. Facebook has tens of thousands of full-time employees, but there's only about 200 of us in the product growth team. And there's actually quite a lot of demand for us around the company. And we have a very simple test that we use before we go into working with a team. And it's this: the retention curve. So this should hopefully be quite a familiar chart to many people. You take the number of active people using your product, you look at how many days, you look at the number of days since acquisition, and you see how many of them are still active. And if it's above 0, you're good to go. It doesn't matter if it's 0.1%, 0.001%, 90%, whatever. If it's somewhere between more than 0 and 100, there's room to grow, and our team can work with you. If it's not at 0, well, you have what unfortunately is the first of my horrendous visual metaphors. I love these. I hope this isn't too bad for you, but yeah, you have a leaky bucket. You're not going to have anybody left. And yeah, this bucket gives me actually traumatic memories of when I was a kid. I used to spend a lot of time at the beach, like running with a bucket to try and get the sand wet enough to build a sandcastle, not realizing that maybe I was just sitting in the wrong part of the beach. Anyway. If you have a leaky bucket, if you have no retention, most of the content I'm going to be showing you today isn't going to work. However, if you do have retention, you've got some growth. In which case, we're working, right? We can actually make things happen. And if you're in that situation, everything's going to be good. Like if you're growing, you just leave it enough time, and eventually you're going to take over the world, right? Well, if that was the case, I wouldn't have a job, and that would be the end of this presentation. Another thing I want to just cover off before we get into the meat of the presentation is that a lot of the tactics I'm about to describe are often thought of as tactics for small companies. Actually, the stuff that we're going to be talking through today, I'm going to make the argument that it applies not only for the smallest of companies, but the biggest of companies. In fact, at Facebook, every single important part of our business has these tactics applied to it. And not just like for 6 months, for 10 months, for a year. Often we're applying these tactics over 5 years, over 10 years. And there's only, I've been told there's only a couple of areas within Facebook where actually we're starting to reach the upper limits of what we can achieve with what are, I think you'll agree by the end of this presentation, some very, very basic tactics. So this is an illustrative slide from 2013, when the Advertiser growth team, as they were known back then, we have had a lot of name changes, but essentially the product growth team were formed. And what I want to show you is essentially that we managed to make an impact very, very quickly. You can see there's like a nice angle change to that chart. We formed the team and we made an impact straight away. But it wasn't the forming of the team that was impactful. And in fact, it wasn't on a monthly basis where we saw that uplift. It was actually from our first launch. Our first launch was 2 separate ideas that we tested at a very small scale. And you can see straight away on like an hour-by-hour basis from the previous week, the jump that we saw from our first win. And the wins were really, really simple. The first one, so this is for Marketplace, by the way, I haven't explained the full context. This is for people who are looking to, this at the time was asking people to try and advertise their pages on Facebook. And the top right one is the first example. We would make a dummy advert and we would say, hey, look, Jasper's Market is your page. Why not advertise that page? And we would put it into a fake advertising slot or a real advertising slot, and it would be a fake advert shown only to you with a single click button to take you through to advertise that page. And the second place to do it was in the main menu. So if you click through to the menu in your Facebook, you would see a special module saying create an ad, manage ads. That came because we realized that many people who were actually looking to create ads couldn't find the right place to do it. Facebook is a marketing business. We are an advertising business. And we had customers or potential customers being turned away because they literally couldn't figure out how to make an advert on Facebook. It's very, very shameful. So in this particular case, we targeted a bunch of people who we knew might be looking for an advert. We put an extra module into their menu, and the growth is there. You can see it for yourself. So this stuff works for big companies. It works for small companies. It works for everybody. And this is another awful visual metaphor of rowing. So if you think back to any Olympic rowing race, I mean, for me, the classic ones would be any Steve Redgrave rowing race. I was a huge Steve Redgrave fan when I was growing up. And the one I remember in particular is the year 2000, where he was in the fours by that point, and they were quite a way ahead. And I think it was the Australian team came back, and by the end they won by like less than a stroke, maybe like an inch, maybe 2 inches. It was really, really close. And when they were interviewing the BBC afterwards, or the BBC were interviewing them, the BBC said to Steve Redgrave, like, that was pretty close, wasn't it? And he looked back and he said, no, it was never in doubt. We were always going to win that. And I think in that particular case, he was showing a bit of bravado. But the truth is that many, many rowing races are won by a matter of a stroke, half a stroke, or inches. And actually, in the product growth team, there's this phrase that you hear over and over and over again, which is the game of inches. We really think that it's these small margins, these small differences that add up over a period of time to help your company grow. And if you think of it like a ledger, right? So your company's growth is a ledger. On the left-hand side, your incomings are your new customers. And on the right-hand side, your outgoings are your churned customers. And if you have, on a given week, more new than churned, you're growing. If you don't, you're not growing. And it really can be, if you've got like a certain level of churn, just a couple of new customers here and there can actually add up to get you into positive growth and make a huge difference. So this game of inches that we talk about, it really is just fighting for every single win, fighting for every single small change that you're looking for, because these things, when you do them across hundreds of times, they really add up. So create a growth team, set them up for success is the next topic. And this is a little bit around how we set ourselves up for success. I appreciate that there might be people watching this who are going to be thinking, well, that's easy for you to say. You've got the resources at Facebook to set up a huge team. I actually think that it's possible to do many of these things without that. Sometimes it's just about good relationships. So as you're going through this, when I'm talking about setting up a team, when I'm talking about like putting a person with a particular skill set in place, I would be looking for allies around your business, thinking through who in my business has this skill set. Can I talk them into giving me 5% of their time, and try to form a squad of people to prove success. And once you start getting that success rolling, hopefully you can get that noticed from the company. Now, this next slide says we think about growth marketing differently, because we do, but it's not necessarily a boast. What we found is that if you look at product growth teams or growth marketing teams around the industry and the skill sets they're looking for, it is actually quite substantially different from what we're doing. And so I want to just spend a couple of slides talking through the skills that we have and the skills that we recommend that other companies have. So first set of skills, digital marketing background. I myself, I started out a restaurant startup, a restaurant reservation startup, where I would be working with the SEO team, I'd be working with the PPC team. I spent a lot of time working on iterative email marketing campaigns, trying to figure out the right way of onboarding customers. Having that digital marketing background is really valuable when it comes to looking for wins on a product, because you're thinking through the types of customers who are coming. If you've worked with in digital marketing, you understand the mix of customers who might be coming to a product. You understand what they might be looking for. You understand what they want, and that's really valuable when it comes to looking for these small improvements. The second skill, we test for SQL. We have a 5-part interview when you come to be a growth person, a product growth person at Facebook. SQL is only one part of that, but it is a vital it is a vital part of that. I think it's actually the most important analytical skill, or analytical concrete skill that you can teach a person. Like people these days will talk about Python, they'll talk about R. Those things are really valuable at the high end when it comes to like data science, when it comes to machine learning. But actually for basic querying, most of the work can be done with SQL. All of these languages essentially are pulling from SQL databases, and you can get the insights you need from SQL. So I'm maybe old-fashioned in this, but I'm going to fight for SQL. I think SQL is a really valuable skill. I think the more people that can learn it, the more successful companies will be. And then there's your final part, creative problem solvers. Now, this one's quite vague, let's be honest, but the truth is that many of the wins that we're going to be talking through today, and many of the wins you've probably seen in your company, are only obvious after you've tested them. Most of A/B tests fail. And so you really need people who are thinking outside the box and who can come up with stuff that at first doesn't seem like it will work, but actually in retrospect was the really obvious move, this thing that you really think could work. So these are the skills that we look for in our team. These are the skills that we try to have as a foundation for working as a product growth organization. But you can't just have people on your own. You need support for them, and you need support from basically every function. So here we've got the product management team, the design team, the analytics team, the marketing team, the engineering team. Each of these are going to bring their own perspectives to a problem, and they're going to make your growth team stronger. In my own experience, I know that I'm a numbers person. Like my background's in mathematics originally. I've got a maths degree, but I can't design anything. Like I've tried to build my own app in the past, and I have, and it looks horrendous. I remember I tweeted some logos out, and the designer I was working at the time sent me a link to a company which would design my logo for me, saying, "James, just stop. You can't design." And she was right. I can't design. And having designers who are doing that qualitative research, who've got an eye for what's going to work for users, is really vital to a lot of the concepts we're going to be talking about. Similarly, engineers are the core function at Facebook. They drive everything. I think most companies that I've worked at typically will have a product manager who's telling engineers what their roadmap looks like. At Facebook, it's kind of the other way around. The engineers are really empowered to do what they want. But in both scenarios, the engineers are closest to the product. They know what's possible. They know what's not possible. Having a strong relationship with engineers is going to help you achieve more. And so having those relationships is really important. And then there's the final step. And this one's a bit cheeky, because what we're saying is that a growth team should be embedded in a product, should be driving growth by changing the product, and have permission to change anything. Now, who at your company has permission to change anything? It's very few people, let's be honest. Normally when you're speaking to a product, a product manager, they've got their own product that they're looking after. They've got this idea that they own the product, and they're going to be quite resistant to you changing things. And this is where, like, when I'm talking about people who don't necessarily have the influence or the buy-in at a senior level initially, building those relationships and being influential is really important, because many of the wins that you're going to get, many of the product growth strategies and tactics we're going to cover here are quite innovative. They are going to require unusual and unexpected changes to your product. Having that buy-in from the product managers, having that buy-in from the engineers to find workarounds, to test if things are going to work, is vital. If you don't have this, it's going to be really difficult to make many of these things work. And one final point before I move on to the next slide is that we sometimes treat the product growth team as a product team, but the product is the goal. So if you think of a classic product team, you'll be working on like search, you'll be working on like a feed, you'll be working on an app. And your goal will be, okay, we need to try and get like this number of people here, but the goal probably will change from half to half depending on the strategic needs of the company. We try to be the product team that own the goal. And so we're really focused on like a team that has a mature space. It's got that retention curve I showed you earlier. And our goal is to increase that number. So we're really focused as a product team on the goal and trying to move those numbers. And if you get everything working, well, actually, like if you don't, it looks a lot like this. And I apologize, this is another terrible visual metaphor, and it's going to get worse, but you're going to have to bear with me on this. So the growth team in this are the lighter fluid, right? If you don't have a match, if you don't have enough coal, if you don't have a barbecue and everything's scattered all over the place, you're just pouring lighter fluid onto a pile of something and nothing's going to happen. You really need the conditions to be right. You really need to have the team supporting you. You really need to have the functions around you, the right skills, and you need to have all of this gelling. Because if you don't, nothing's going to happen. But if you do, oh yeah, that's right. This metaphor gets worse. I'm sorry. Yeah, if you do, like it can be fantastic. But okay, that's enough of the team stuff. I'm going to move on to the stuff that you probably want to see now, which is some concrete examples of things we've done at Facebook. And the first section here is on personalization. So personalization really comes down to 3 principles of great marketing, all right? The right people at the right place at the right time. Right people, right place, right time. And many of these wins, well, we're going to talk through some now, always fall into these categories. And I can completely vouch for these strategies because I've seen them work myself. So this first one, if you show something to the right people, make it more prominent. This is an example from our Pages product. It's very similar to the one that you saw earlier with the marketplace. People were setting up pages and they couldn't find the page they'd set up. They were searching for it and finding it that way. They were going through their newsfeed and waiting until they saw a post on their page. They were really struggling to access their page. Showing this in the menu, like in 2 places, 1, just below your name, and 2, in the actual main category of all of our products, hugely increased the number of people creating pages, accessing their pages, and the engagement with their pages. It can be quite buried in a product, but if you're showing it, but you can make it prominent to the right person, or you can put it in a prominent position to the right person, you're going to have a huge success. And this is something that I've seen like all over the place. Going back to that restaurant startup, the restaurant reservation startup, we actually had the most popular module on our homepage was exactly this type of module. It was something that would show you at the top left of the homepage, you would see the restaurants, the last 3 restaurants that you looked at. And it was like 50% of return visitors to the site. So people who'd seen a restaurant before would click on that module. It was wildly popular. It was way more popular than any of the other features on our homepage because we were showing that specific module or that specific content to the right people. Now, unfortunately, it was on the homepage. And we all know what happens to homepages, right? Yeah, that's right. We got into a fight with some other department over what the most important thing was, and it got replaced for a marketing campaign that lasted for 3 months and the module never came back. And that brings me on to right place, because we have made this mistake as well. And we've made this mistake with the Messenger app. So you will all remember, I assume, if not, I'll give you a brief summary of the time that Facebook used to be one app, or the Facebook product used to be one app. It was the Facebook core product, and you would message people from inside that. But a while back, for strategic reasons and for growth reasons, to be honest, we realized that we actually needed to have our Messenger product as a separate app. And we needed to try and convince as many people on Facebook as possible to switch over to that Messenger app. And so we did exactly what I've just described. We said, okay, this is really important to the company. We're going to put it at the top of our homepage, which for most people is the newsfeed. We're going to have a banner, and it's going to say install Messenger. And this is the wrong fight to have. Putting stuff on the homepage is really problematic for a couple of reasons. 1, everybody wants to have their content on the homepage. So if you do win, which isn't guaranteed, it's only going to be there for a short amount of time before the next big project comes along. But the second reason is that the homepage is a very generic page. Like in your product, it might be where most people go, it might not. That really depends from company to company. But finding a contextual place to put that module is probably going to be more successful. In the case of Messenger, 7 times more successful. What we realized actually was by waiting until people went into to message someone themselves and putting a Messenger module there at the top got us 7 times more installs. And not only did it get us 7 times more installs on like a day-to-day basis, we could keep it up for a lot longer because we didn't have teams arguing over this real estate. And this is something that I've seen again and again and again. Putting a module in the right contextual place will get you a ton more uplift in your growth. Going back to that restaurant reservation site, another module that we had on our homepage was an email, like an email sign-up module. We would say, hey, sign up for deals. And it was fine. There was a pop-up. The pop-up was arguably not successful. I'm personally am not a big fan of pop-ups, although I appreciate they work in certain circumstances. But we managed to get 50% growth by moving it away from the homepage. We would put it on the restaurant page. And in particular, whenever that restaurant had a deal, we would say, hey, do you like this deal? Get more deals by signing up for our emails. Putting it in that place actually got us 50% more signups. So the context, the place where you put that any given module that you're looking to promote to a customer is vital. And really thinking that through, I really encourage everybody to think that through because it can make a huge impact to your business. Okay, final one, right time. And this one actually is so basic it can be forgotten, but it really is important to remember the right time. And this example is a classic funnel abandonment problem. So when is the right time to remind somebody to complete something they've just done? Well, we believe the answer is actually right after they finished right after they've finished not doing it. Because in many cases, when someone drops off a funnel, you as a product person or a growth person or a marketing person might be thinking, oh, it's because our product sucks. It's because we have too many fields. It's because we have this like flow and the payment's quite slow to go through. Oh, it's so frustrating that our product's so bad. And that's true for some people, probably. But there's also a lot of people who are just busy. That, like in my case, I can think of a dozen times right off the top of my head that I've forgotten to do something because I don't know where my wallet is. And I get to the payments page and I'm like, oh, where's my wallet? I'll have to come back and do this later. If you can show people that you have understood that need, that they want to complete something, that you have saved their progress, actually reminding them straight afterwards can be really valuable. And in this case, it was for exactly the example we were talking to earlier, people who wanted to advertise their pages. We found that if we reminded people, hey, look, we saw that you were looking to create an advert for this page or promote this page, and you dropped off, but don't worry, you can just click here and you can finish that flow. It was really impactful. It actually got us a 12% uplift in conversion rate. And if you have done like a lot of A/B testing, you'll appreciate a 12% win is a huge win. This isn't like a novelty effect type win where you see an impact for like a couple of weeks. This was 12% consistent growth after we launched this. So really reminding people right after they've done something, showing them that you can make it easy for them to finish the problem that they're trying to solve is really, really valuable. And yeah, I think showing something at the right time is a fantastic way of getting growth. So let's look at an example of personalization, like at a more generic level. This is a coupon. So if you fill out this form, you will get a coupon to spend $50 on advertising in Facebook. And we A/B tested the difference between the left one, which is relatively generic. It will say, hey, look, you can reach target customers, you can deepen relationships. On the right one, we actually ditched that and we just made it personalized. We would say, hey, Denise, you have 45 people who like your page. Panorama Mania, what a page name. And in the past 30 days, there have been 100 new connections to that page. Those 3 simple personalized points in that form gained us a 40% uplift in the number of people signing on to that coupon. It was huge. Really, really basic personalization. It doesn't take a lot of engineering to make this happen. Huge uplift in coupons. So like we're really proud of that one. Okay, this is my favorite example because I have been so burned by localization in the past, and I'm sure many people have. When you're building a product across multiple countries, as I have in quite a few roles, typically the process is the same. You come up with a product, you will finalize it in your native language, and you will work with your internationalization or content team and say, hey, look, we need to get some translations done for this. We're looking to launch it as soon as possible. And you get the translations back and you're like, okay, these people are experts and that's probably going to be good enough, right? And in fact, actually, it's not. If you think about how many times you've seen an A/B test just in English, like why are we A/B testing so often in English but not in other languages? And I've seen many businesses do this where they're A/B testing the heck out of one country, but they're not doing it in other markets. And localization is really important, and it can be really challenging. So in this example, we have a user who's going to be seeing this from India. India is not a unique country in that it has a lot of different languages. So if you think of like Belgium, where there's 3 official languages, you can think of South Africa, where English is the main language, but you've got Afrikaans, you've got lots of localized languages. Often when you're showing someone like content, the IP address enough on its own is not going to be enough to tell the user, the person you're trying to show this content to, or sorry, it's not going to be enough to tell you what language you should be showing something to. So this is a problem that we were trying to solve in India, and we sent a research team out there to actually specifically solve this issue. And when a research team go out with Facebook, they will spend 10, 12 hours a day locked in a tiny room with no lights, no windows, or sorry, like a little light, no windows, watching interviews with people, scribbling notes. And the interview team in this particular instance were hungry, so they went out for lunch and they went to a local street food cart. And on that street food cart, they noticed that everything was written twice. It was written in 2 different languages because the food truck vendor didn't know which of the 2 local prevalent languages was going to be the one any given person spoke. So they wrote it twice. And they thought, well, hey, if we don't know which language someone's going to be speaking, why don't we just write it in a couple of different languages and see what works? And we have gained millions of posts from that simple trick of just, if we're not sure what language we should be showing you, we're going to show you 2 languages. I think this is wonderful. I really love this like innovative thinking of like, hey, look, you've got languages. Why not share 2? And if you don't know them, share both. It's just, yeah, it's a great win. So I get really excited about localization generally, and it's something that I bang the drum on a lot. I'm really passionate about having a good localized product to each of our users. But this particular one is fantastic. Okay, another example. So this is a story about developing a product. And when you're developing a product, if it's a new product, you might spend 6 months on it, you might spend a year on it, you might spend 2 years on it. And while you're working on it, you're going to come up with like some cool internal name. You're going to call it like Jedi Master Button, or you're going to call it like, I don't know, BB-8. Oh, I don't know, sorry. I'm terrible with coming up with things on the spot. But you're going to give it a cool name that makes sense to you. And there's going to become a point when you think, well, okay, we need to actually come up with a proper name for this product. And at that point, there's going to be a temptation not to call it like the cool name you've been giving it, but to give it the internal name that makes sense to you, and to assume that's the right thing because it makes sense to you. And actually, in this particular instance, we were trying to promote or help people promote pages. And so we would launch this module that you see on the left, not with the words boost post, but with the word promote, because we wanted people to promote their post. And we launched it, and it did okay. But the product growth person who was working on this was getting a lot of feedback from around the team saying, hey, like, what is a promote? Like, if I click on a button, what does promoting it actually do? Because promoting is quite a vague term. And so he tried a few different phrasings, and he ended up with boost post, because boost feels like instinctive. Like it's the same as what you've got, but you're boosting it. You're going to maybe get it in front of more people. And we saw a 16% uplift from changing the word here. And I think this is like a real challenge for everybody, to go through your products and look at the text that you're using to try and get people through a flow, or to get people to do things across your product. The wording needs to be really intuitive, and it's going to be intuitive to you, but probably not to other people. This is where like your user research testing comes in practice, showing it to people, your family and friends, but not the same ones that you normally show it to, getting it in front of people who've never seen your product before, and seeing if the wording makes sense, and really thinking through, does this button do the thing that we think it says it does? Because if you've got a button that says that does exactly what it says it does, that's great marketing. So yeah, this is a challenge for everybody to really spend a lot of time reviewing the wording on your buttons. I know this seems like a really basic CRO practice and a really basic CRO win, but actually you can really iterate on this stuff and really get a lot of uplift by really leaning in to the wording of buttons and the details of buttons. Which brings me on to my next slide. Test your buttons. We're obsessed with buttons, completely obsessed. We're obsessed with the location, we're obsessed with the size, we're obsessed with the color. The labels really matter. In fact, Alex Schultz, the vice president of data at Facebook, often refers to us as the green button team because we are so obsessed with buttons. And we take it as a compliment. So here's an example of buttons and why they matter. And this is an example from MBasic. So we have a bunch of flows that are really, or a bunch of Facebook apps that are really optimized for people with low-end devices. In this case, it's a Nokia. We also have a really popular device in India. I think it's called Kite, which runs on KaiOS. And often what you'll find with these devices is that they have a screen that looks pretty modern. I think some of them actually have much more modern designs than this, but the screens aren't touch screens. And you're accessing the internet with a T9 keyboard, which sounds crazy, and it is crazy. Like if you try and use it, it basically feels unusable unless you're gaining access to the internet for the first time. But in this case, if you log into Facebook, or you try to log into Facebook, you're trying to create an account with Facebook, you would have seen a screen that looked something like this. You've got your email, you've got your password. Actually, phones are more prevalent as a contact point in certain countries. Then you can log in, then you can click if you forgot your password. And then in tiny, tiny text, you can barely even see it, sign up here. And if you want to get there on a T9 keyboard, you're not clicking on it. You're clicking down, 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 until you get to the right place. That's a lot of clicks. And if you're trying to log in, Well, actually, you already know where to go. You already know how to use the product. And to be honest, people don't tend to need to log in all that much once they've logged into Facebook once. So we thought, okay, well, the sign up button is really hard to reach. Why don't we try putting it at the top? And we saw an 8% uplift in signups from this flow. 8% just from putting a button in a different location, just from making it easier to use. And we thought, well, okay, 8%, that's a good start, but that's only one change. What can we do next? Let's test the colors. I think I mentioned that we get known as the green button team. Well, we changed the buttons to green and we turned the link at the bottom into a green button. We saw 11% uplift. That's huge. And we thought, well, okay, we're actually cooking with fire here now. This is looking pretty good. Do people know what sign up means? What does sign up mean? Like, you're signing up to a newsletter? Is it intuitive to people that signing up for Facebook is? So we tried create new account and we saw a 16% uplift. It was huge. It was unbelievable. And so, like, we're really proud of that. Okay, next step, next phase, removing steps you don't need, removing friction. And you need to be truly, truly ruthless when it comes to removing steps. You need to be willing to really fight for this stuff. And here's an example from Instagram. So in this particular instance, this was when we launched Instagram Live. The original flow, if you wanted to go live with a video, would check to see if your connection was strong enough to actually go live. So if you wanted to go live, you would click Start Live Video, and you would get the screen that basically said, hey, we're checking your connection. Okay, you're good to go. We trust that your connection is big enough. And we thought, well, okay, that makes sense, but do we really need to check the connection? Like, why are we checking the connection? Like, it's either going to work or it's not going to work. So we removed it. And we saw millions of more broadcasts as a result of this. And not just because it was removing the friction, it also builds trust in the product. If you're showing someone something that says, hey, we're just checking that you're okay to do this, they're thinking, oh, maybe my internet isn't good enough. Maybe I need to go find someone with stronger Wi-Fi. And suddenly they've abandoned the funnel, and you're going to have to market them and say, hey, please come back and broadcast again. Just removing that step actually increased confidence of people in the product. And so they were broadcasting more often. Very, very simple technique, really, 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 really effective. So remove friction, don't add it. And here's an example of a test we launched that didn't work. So again, you've got a sign-up flow on the left-hand side with a bunch of forms that we need to fill out. And often our growth at the moment is coming from countries where people are gaining access to the internet for the first time. Some of these people can be quite elderly. They might not be very internet savvy. And so when we're asking for information, it can be important to actually explain to people why we're asking for a particular piece of information. So we had the idea of, for this particular flow, breaking it out and saying, well, okay, let's really lean into explaining what the flows are about. Like, enter your mobile phone number or email address. This is only going to be seen by your friends, but you will use it to log in. Enter your age, enter your birthday. This is only going to be shown to your friends. So, like, really trying to explain some of the privacy elements of this information. But what we saw was a 20% drop in signups. That's not because people didn't appreciate us explaining this information to them. It's because they were on 2G devices. If you're on a 2G device, loading a page 3 times is really, really painful. It's going to take you a lot longer to get through this flow, and you're going to get frustrated and you're going to give up. So even in instances where it's intuitive to make a change that explains more information, often you'll find that the simpler basic version is the one that works the best. And this is a really valid use case for why A/B testing is so important. It's something that we really try and encourage across Facebook as often as possible. A/B testing is vital. And it's also worth flagging, and just being totally honest here, that most A/B tests don't work. I think I saw an Optimising presentation once where they claimed that on average 10% of their experiments were winners, but if you were a really good company, you could get up to 25%. And I'm not super convinced by like better companies getting up to 25% part, but somewhere between 10 and 25% feels right. It really does take a lot of iteration and a lot of trying and a lot of failing, and being willing to fail at A/B tests and willing to just keep trying stuff until it works to make this stuff work. So while many of the examples I've just shown you are actually quite powerful, yeah, like, you are going to have more failures. Don't be discouraged by that. It's just part of the game. So if you put this together, you're going to get more angle changes. This term I mentioned earlier. I love, this was new to me when I joined Facebook, but I love the concept of an angle change. You take a graph and you're moving that line, you're changing the angle of the line. It's the best of all the wins. It's like the other two examples would be like, I guess, one shots, where maybe you find like a win that works on like one particular day, or you have like a really clever creative marketing campaign for a particular event. You see a bump and then the baseline returns to normal. Maybe you find like a hidden cache of users. I once managed to find out that we were not collecting opt-ins from PPC in a business, not Facebook, but another business. And that was like a great example of like, I managed to not necessarily change the angle of the line, but I moved the baseline higher permanently, and I was very, very proud of that. But angle changes are really what we're in the business of here. Like, we're really looking for things that are going to change a product and move that growth to a faster angle. But it doesn't just work for products. It also works for brand marketing. Personalization in this particular instance is vital. And this is an example of Friends Day. We realized that the thing that really works at Facebook, or the thing that makes Facebook valuable, isn't necessarily our product, it's your friends. It's the fact that you've got a bunch of people in one place who you can speak to, who you can engage with, who are going to talk to you about what's going on in your life. And so we wanted to have a brand marketing campaign that reflected that. And we came up with Friends Day. It's something that pulls in photos from your friends. It pulls in photos of you with your friends. It pulls in comments that you and your friends have left with each other. And it really brings home the idea that Facebook is a place for friends to connect. And it's really powerful. That wouldn't work without personalization. So it really is quite a valuable strategy. So just to summarize what we've been through, the number one thing before you do anything I've just talked about, I'm going to remind you again, check that retention curve. I've seen it used a lot around the industry. I've seen it used a lot at Facebook. Having that retention curve, making sure that you've got something to work with, is vital. If you don't, you need to actually work on your product and make sure that you've got some level of product market fit before you do any of this stuff. Second, set up your growth team for success. Make sure that they've got buy-in from the product team. Make sure that they have good relationships with all of your cross-functional partners. If you don't have the ability to do this, you're going to have to hustle slightly. You're going to have to try and reach out to people and try and form a squad of people to work on this stuff. And you're going to have to be very, very persuasive. Don't be afraid of this stuff doesn't work straight away. Many of these growth wins are about leaning in, about working for a long period of time to try and convince people to do things, and finding ways of removing friction to making the things that you want to happen. Good relationships will come from these wins, but you need to fight to make sure that your reputation is good to begin with. Third, personalize. Right people, right place, right time. A lot of the stuff that we talked through in that section, it probably seems quite basic, but as I mentioned, like, it's only basic when you get the wins. Thinking through in this framework, I found really useful for helping you figure out A/B tests that are going to drive wins for your company. Then buttons. Buttons. We love buttons. I know it seems cliched again, but this stuff really matters. You can be working on this stuff for years at a time and continuing to improve it, and it will matter to your business. And finally, always remove friction. So with that, I'm going to move on to the Q&A section. We've got about 15 minutes left for questions, so hopefully I can help you. But before we move on to that, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for sitting through this presentation. I really appreciate it.
Brilliant, and thank you very much. I love a speaker that sticks to time, and it was very well structured. And we do have some questions that have been going on in the chat. So if I'm going to start with those, and I'm actually going to interweave a couple of my own in there at the same time, because they're kind of related. I should caveat, I mean, your job is fantastic. You know, you must feel like a kind of kid in a sweet shop. Because, you know, it sounds like there's lots of things you can play around with, and lots of opportunities to optimize and improve, and that can have a fairly dramatic effect. But we're going to go straight to a negative question. You did mention in passing that, you know, that elsewhere companies talk about, and I might have got the number the wrong way around, 20 or 25% of tests failing, or it might have been the opposite. Go on, what's the worst one you've been involved in? You know, how big a drop did you see? Or have you seen a test that actually had a negative impact rather than a positive one?
Oh, I mean, yeah, like so many. If we're talking about the worst negative impacts, I mean, the worst impacts normally come, if we're being honest, from experiments that break something and you don't realize because you've not been paying attention. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I've seen tests that break our product. let's be honest. I mean, yeah, like I work in the integrity space, so we have to be a little bit more careful than maybe some of the other functions. But for sure, we have experiments that fail and break the product, and you need to make sure that you're not like losing millions. I mean, I guess In terms of like actual experiments that have made things worse when we're really expecting them to win, often it's because we don't understand what we're doing with the product yet, or we're relatively new to a product. So to give you an example, I mean, I'm working in the integrity space, so these are all quite boring examples, I guess, but we've been trying to encourage a lot of people to upgrade their security to two-factor authentication, particularly if they have a certain level of followers or a certain number of friends or a certain reach. And we've really been struggling in places to actually get the levels that we'd like there. Right. Not because like we found messaging that works over time, but actually what you're saying to someone is, hey, why don't you make logging into Facebook harder? You're going to have to come up with, like, maybe you're going to have to download an app. You're going to have to like confirm your contact point. You're going to have to go through this flow that at times isn't super well optimized. We've had a lot of failures there, but it's not necessarily like impacted the experiment. It's just it's taken us a lot longer to get to a good place.
And there were two questions that were related around this. So what kind of timeframes do you work to? I mean, it might be a volume thing rather than the time thing, but at what point do you call it? Where do you go, oh, it could get better, or no, that's really bad, stop it?
Okay. Yeah, no. I'm a fan of the best practices around this. So I normally I would be an advocate of something like 2 business cycles, which for us at Facebook would be 2 weeks. Oh, wow. I would be lying if I said that every experiment at Facebook ran for 2 weeks. The truth is that we're a huge company, and like any huge company, the level of quality that goes into experimentation is very, very different in different parts of the business. So I always try and push for 2 weeks as a minimum. Right. And even then, like, you should be doing your power calculations, and you should be trying to figure out in advance how long you should be running it for. I also, this again is not something that I think is standard across the company, but I'm a huge believer that you should be setting the amount of time you're running an experiment for in advance. If you do that, you've got really clear conditions for failure, really clear conditions for success. And it might be the case that you get to the end of it and you've got an inconclusive result, but you've actually, by doing that, you've got a margin for error, and you're saying, well, okay, maybe this isn't a 5% win, we can run it for longer, and maybe it's a 2% win. Or you can say this isn't worth it to us, and you can iterate. But I really am a strong believer in setting an experiment duration before you run the experiment, because otherwise you can be tempted to just keep things running for long periods of time, and you can also be tempted to do the opposite, which is run an experiment for 3 hours, see a massive uplift, and go, okay, well, we've won. And yeah, like I don't like that at all.
So there is a combination, because like you say, it's obviously a high volume site versus time, that you've got to compare both factors. I mean, probably related to that, how many kind of projects roughly can you run projects concurrently, and how do you kind of mitigate that one might impact the other?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we do have a lot of experiments running at the same time. So we have this concept called universes, and so what you try and do is group any experiment that's likely to impact another experiment into a given universe, and you've essentially got 100% of the traffic to play with. And like we run into the same limitations very quickly that other companies do there, to be honest. You can't really have more than like I don't know what the number is for Facebook. It's probably huge. I haven't run a lot of experiments on newsfeed myself, but if you're subdividing traffic, you will quickly get to a point where you can't run concurrent experiments. However, we do try to make sure that we're running, like where we get the volume is just on the sheer number of products. So particular flows, particular pages, particular feeds, particular aspects of feeds. You can run a lot of concurrent experiments there. You are always going to have that collision risk. You are always going to have the risk that what you're doing is going to break something else. But you need to, I guess for each business it's different, but you need to essentially figure out where you're willing to risk that. And I'm comfortable with, for instance, running a concurrent experiment on the newsfeed and the search tool. Like they don't often interact with each other. There is a chance that something's going to go wrong and it's going to bias the results of your experiment. But at the end of the day, we are a business. We're not a scientific research community, and so like getting to 95% is like good, but it's not we're not like the Higgs boson. We're not trying to get to 5 sigma or anything, unless. I mean, maybe we're on some instances, but
I like the phrasing, the idea of the collision. I was thinking of overlap, but I like the idea of collision. I also think Facebook Universe sounds like a great gaming platform at some point, but that's another thing. And then coming back to kind of my point at the start about, there must be so many opportunities, so many projects and things you could test. How on earth do you prioritize? Which goes first? Which is more important than the other?
Oh, yeah, that is the big question. I mean, it's definitely challenging. we try to use data wherever possible. So each individual team will set its goals on like a quarterly or a half basis, and they will essentially be aiming towards those goals. So when we're lining up our experiments, what we're trying to do is we're trying to line up the expected impact versus that specific goal. So we will have a North Star metric for a team, and everything will be prioritized against that. But then there's like the art part of it, to be honest. There's you're never quite sure what impact an experiment's going to have. Most of them are going to fail. So it's like the classic example of prioritizing expected impact versus engineering effort to actually make it happen. We will, like, one place where we are lucky is that we have a lot of qualitative research to work from with each of our teams. We have a very, very excellent, frankly, the best I've ever worked with qualitative research team, and that really helps when it comes to making decisions. Like often when you've got a bunch of ideas, you can focus in on where the qualitative research is pointing you as well as the quantitative research, and that has been an icebreaker, or sorry, not an icebreaker, but like a deal breaker for us in terms of where we're prioritizing. But it is an art, and it does ultimately come down to like people in rooms making guesses at times.
Yeah, I'm guessing you get kind of other stakeholders, other people coming in saying, "Oh, we'd like to try this. What do you guys think?" Or kind of people putting things in the queue.
Yeah, we do, and Facebook's quite a bottoms-up company, so actually it's slightly worse than that. And often what you'll find is that you will have someone come to you and say, "Hey, I've built this feature. I'd like to launch it on your platform." Right. That is not an unusual thing to happen. In which case, what you have to do is try and make sure that you have space for them in your universe. You have to work with them to make sure they're not going to break your code. You probably will bring them along to your experiment review. So every team, every universe should have its own experiment review, and you should be making sure that you understand what's going on around that. But yeah, like it can be very chaotic. Like there's a lot going on, and as with any kind of big networked organization, you have to spend a lot of time making sure you understand what other people are planning on doing and trying to get alignment with them. And that's the cost of being a big business, to be honest. It's just that extra investment you have to spend in alignment with multiple teams.
No, absolutely. Yeah, and I guess just to find, and this is me being indulgent because I'm always fascinated at how kind of companies manage development and growth and what have you. But for you, and you don't have to give me specific numbers for obvious reasons, but what does success look like for your team, and how are you kind of reviewed as a business unit? So are you expected to deliver an increase in revenue or engagement or whatever once a quarter or what have you? Or is it just this iterative, every 2 weeks we want to see a nudge or an improvement?
So we have a 6-month cycle for performance reviews, most companies, but each individual person will be judged on the success of their team. So our business unit is embedded. So we work with the individual teams. I work with the community integrity team, and even at like my level, I'm working with 5 teams. So it's quite difficult to say which one metric I'm being judged against. But each of those 5 teams will have their goal metric, or in some cases, they have sub-teams that have a goal metric. Yeah. An individual analyst working in my team, for instance, will be judged against how much success or how much progress they've made against those goals. It does get difficult when you get to like a big level to judge an organization overall. All we can do is, I guess, we try to point to individual success stories around the team and the impact we're seeing elsewhere. And to be honest, a lot of it is based on supply and demand. And one of the things that keeps us going is that there's more demand for our team than we can actually afford to supply at the moment. And so there is a degree of that. It is difficult to judge this when you have the operating model, though, because every team is essentially being judged on its own set of metrics, and you have to take all of that into account. So it involves a lot of thinking, to be honest. It's not necessarily like there's not necessarily a clear-cut answer to that.
No, I absolutely understand. Awesome. Look, that's been fantastic. We've run to time. We've had questions. I'm really glad you've been able to field those questions for us. Will you be staying around for any parts of the day or what have you, and dipping in and out of any sessions?
I'm going to be dipping in and out. I'm actually in the middle of road mapping right now.
Oh, right. Okay.
And basically, I'm going to be at as much of today as I can and just ducking out for particular meetings. But yeah, hopefully I'll be around.
No problem, because people can obviously, they might fire some questions at you later on during the day. And obviously people will be watching this on kind of catch up later on as well. So they might see it then.
Yeah, good questions.
Awesome. So thank you again, James. Big thanks. I'm not going to get a round of applause, but there's no physical audience to do that with. Maybe we should have got a sound effect for that. But thank you once again. For everybody else, we've got about 4 or 5 minutes till the sessions start. If you go across to the sessions tab on the side, they've all been opened up now, apart from the tab which has been open all morning. Sounds a bit odd. And we're breaking into 5 strands there. So we've got Sam Noble in the paid media room. You've got Kevin in the SEO. We've got Anna in the analytics, and then we also have Emily and Hannah in the content and the social rooms. So I'll hopefully see you over there shortly, and then after that next session there'll be a break before the rest of the day continues. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks, James.
Thank you.
Leave that one.